came to our little party last night. You might be asking yourself why the DJ is up on stage. That DJ is Stanley Richards. Shout out, because he did an awesome job DJing that party last night.
I did not pay you to do that, but
no,
thank
he
you.
didn't.
I appreciate that.
That's free.
I did not have Tina's song request, and I really apologize for that.
So in preparing for this, it's good to see everybody. Thanks for coming. In preparing for this, Stanley and I thought that we could tell you a little bit about who we are first, and the work that we do and that we're doing at PBL Works and PBL Now. And then we could get into a conversation with each other and then open it up for some questions. Does that sound okay? Yeah. Cool. Oh, sweet. Here we go. You want to start? All right, cool. So my name is Ari, and I am new to PBL Works. The role that I play at PBL Works is as Director of Curriculum Design for the new division that we have called PBL Now. And PBL Now is responsible for developing project-based units of instruction. So if you're familiar with what PBL Works does and the resources that we have, we focus on project-based learning. And it's mostly, historically, it's been focused on professional learning. And now what we're doing is we are developing full curriculum units. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. But I come from the world of pedagogy, I come from the world of professional learning, and I come from sort of the world of curriculum, thinking about curriculum. I was an English teacher for about 15 years, and then an instructional coach. So this is my first time out of a school district since I was 21. I'm in my mid-40s. So this is a big, big thing for me to join PBL Works to do this work. So that's a little bit about me and sort of the world that I come from. Stanley.
All right. So hello, old, new, and future friends. So I'm Stanley Richards. I am the Director of Curriculum-Based Professional Learning at PBL Works. And so that basically means that I am working very closely with this guy to be able to consider what is the intersection between the learning that we do and we actually provide for teachers with the curriculum that we have, right? Previously, before that, I was a science teacher for 10 years, instructional coach, and worked a lot within PBL Works for the past 7 years. But I think the major thing, and the thing that I think is the most important aspect around my role as a professional learning designer is a deep and unwavering respect and love for teachers and also through that the students they serve. And I think it's going to be an important thing. I think it's a simple thing, right? It's a simple thing to say, but in a lot of ways I think professional learning is done to teachers rather than with teachers and beside teachers. And so I think the thing that we're really trying to focus on and work in within curriculum-based professional learning is the ways to be able to create space and create space for learning, to create a culture of learning, and then through that, get to student learning itself.
Maybe what we could do is talk about the way this is all playing out.
For sure.
For our work. So with PBL Now, with the curriculum units we're designing, the problem that we are trying to solve for is that we're trying to get more projects into the hands of more students who are furthest from opportunity across the country, hopefully one day across the world. We're trying to remove barriers. We know that doing a project for the first time can be difficult. We know that there are a lot of moving pieces. We firmly believe that still that there is an important role for teachers as designers, as customizers, right? But we also know at the same time that right now in this time and place, teachers are overloaded, over capacity. They're doing more work than they ever have done before. Pay hasn't necessarily gone up all around, right? And so we are trying to remove barriers to ensure that teachers can have a really successful first experience with project-based learning. So there are 3 drivers to my work around the curriculum design for project-based learning, and I think this starts to get to where we talk about equity. So one, we're trying to remove barriers for teachers, right? We want to make it as easy as possible to move through their first project. The second piece is that we want to ensure that our projects are locally driven and globally relevant. We know how important it is for culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally sustaining pedagogies, to have knowledge of your students, to understand the context from which your students are coming from, the rich assets that they bring. And so we're designing our first set of units in partnership with teachers from Kentucky. Is Kentucky out there today? Kentucky, there we go, Kentucky love. So we are designing with teachers in Kentucky for the Kentucky context. So they're locally driven, but the issues and the topics that we're getting at and the themes around social, racial, and environmental justice that we're getting at are globally relevant. These are topics that every child in this country will need to grapple with as adults, right now as children, as youth. So we want to engage them in that way. The locally driven piece, we want to ensure that our units can be customized, right? So we are attending to that, and we're also ensuring that they connect on a larger scale. And then the third piece, also connected to equity, is that these units are going to have high quality embedded performance assessments in them. So we are ensuring that they are tied to the learning outcomes. And that's an equity piece as well, right? We want our projects, for the first time that a teacher tries out a PBL, to be high quality learning. So we're doing that. Those are our three drivers. And we're really excited. I just want to tell you real quick, because we're designing in science, 2 projects per grade, K through 12. And then we're going to social studies. And then we're going to math. And then we're going to ELA. And the vision is that a school district can pick up an entire suite of projects and have them and customize them and use them K-12 and be able to follow their students' learning throughout an entire pathway in their education. That is powerful, and that's where we're moving. It's pretty dope, right? It's pretty dope.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, this is the thing. Like, Ari and I work very closely, if you don't notice already. Pretty much we talk and meet at least 2 or 3 times a week. This is a very beginning phase. We're at a very startup phase to be able to do the work. And I do think it's important to be able to have that connectivity, right? The professional learning and also the projects go hand in hand. And so in order to do that, we have to understand the connections between the two throughout the process of development, of learning, of iteration, of design, of redesign and redesign and redesign, because I always want to change the things that I do. But I think it's just important to be able to have that relationship and the space to be able to do that, because we do have to contextualize everything in relation to teachers and also make sure that there's the opportunity and space for teachers to be able to make the changes that they need to contextualize to their communities.
Maybe you could talk about a little bit, so as you're developing the professional learning, could you talk about where you are providing teachers the space to do that? To contextualize, to use some of the equity tools that we have to be able to do that, and how you're keeping teachers like with their eyes towards equity and in ensuring that they can customize for the students who are in front of them.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Ari. So, I mean, I do think, like, I've been playing around with this idea, and this is something that, like, came to me a couple of days ago, and I'm like, I'm messing around with it a little bit, that, like, professional learning is actually, I think, within a deeper learning space, we are space creators for change makers, right? And, like, by that, I mean, we are not the people that are saying, you do this, and you go from page 1 to page 100, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to be able to do page 1 to page 100. I do think it's a space to be able to provide learning and really make meaning around a learning and contextualize it to the classroom, because we do not know your students. You know your students. And so we should not be the ones to be able to tell you what is best for your students, right? But what is the input? What is the learning to be able to apply then into a school space, a classroom space? And I think it's just an important mind shift. And I've been thinking about this a lot, just because of the fact that, like, if we create the space, then from there, hopefully build the culture, and hopefully create the conversations and help facilitate conversations, then from there, we get to learners, right? Because, like, you know, true fact, I mean, like, I was a classroom teacher for 10 years. I miss being in a classroom every single day. And the way that I am able to think about the work that I do now is because the teachers that we work with is the way that we get to the learners. And so with that, there's this, it becomes more important to be able to create space and to create mind shifts to be able to get to the learners, because I don't see them every day anymore. What is the way that I know that the work that I'm doing is effective, is to be able to do that and to be able to create those spaces. I do think that, you know, like within PBL Works, within all our professional learning, we have 4 key equity levers that we really focus on. And they are knowledge of students, and they're driving question, because we're PBL, so everything has a driving question. Like, everything has a driving question within our work. I had to write these down. I know the levers, I don't remember the driving question, so hold on one second, right? Knowledge of students. How can I learn about and build relationships with my students to design and facilitate projects that capture their interest, honor their strengths and identities, and meet their needs, right? One aspect of our lever. The next lever is cognitive demand. How can I hold high intellectual expectations and provide appropriate support for all students in order to advance each student's academic mindset and cognitive growth? Literacy. How can I provide experiences that deepen students' capacity to read, write, listen, and speak across a range of contexts and disciplines? And then the 4th one is going to be around shared power. And I think, to me, like, this is the power of project-based learning itself. The sharing of power, that learning is not a one-way street, that we work side by sides. We are not sages on the stage. We are guides on the side for the work, right? So shared power is, how do I cultivate student voice, choice, agency, and interdependence in our classrooms? And those are the 4 overarching equity levers that we really focus on within our professional learning, right? And you can see that there's a lot of connectivity around knowledge of students within the professional learning. We do a lot of the work together to be able to think about how those things interact on the curriculum side and also the professional learning side.
Yeah, I think one tension that comes up for me when I think about those 4 equity levers, as developing the curriculum, right? So we're writing lesson plans. We are trying to attend to those equity levers in the lesson plans themselves. As I think about pedagogy, and I think about, so actually, here's a really interesting thing. I was reading this, I was getting deep into the literature, and came across this one article that talked about the etymology of the word curriculum. Comes from the Latin currere, which means to run the race course. And we think about curriculum as the set of materials, the books, the handouts, the things. In actuality, it's all about how this person, this teacher, runs the race course, less the materials themselves, right? So for me, as I'm thinking about designing these PBL units, and I'm thinking about, how do I actually resource a teacher? How do I help them learn how to become a better practitioner through the materials that they're looking at? How do I help them attend to equity? So it's like a writer will write, you know, do a turn and talk. Well, I know a turn and talk is a good strategy to use. I know we're having our writers use protocols that we use all the time. But what's the level 1 guidance? Because I know that from an equity perspective, I can have a teacher will read that lesson plan, turn and talk. Okay, students, turn and talk. And the same outcomes that fall along racial lines are going to happen. I know in the pairs who is going to talk, who is not. I know for multilingual learners who will talk, who is not. So for me, I'm thinking about, well, how do we be intentional with the guidance that we're providing the beginning PBL practitioner to ensure that they run a protocol the first time with equity in mind? How do I help them think about their students, shared power, and how do we have our writers communicate that, which leaves space for them to know and to think about and to run that protocol the way they know best, but also to make sure that students don't get left behind. Because I know that students, if we don't attend to that, our black and brown students will get left behind in the classrooms. Historically, that has continued to happen. And so we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? That they are included, that they are valued, that their voices get heard.
My guy just did a Latin, you actually just dropped the Latin etymology of curriculum. That's amazing. I did not expect that.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think about that. I'm thinking about also how we help teachers just in general get through that race course. And so, like, you know, a lot of folks probably know that first thing you do in a project, you know, you got your launch, your entry event, you introduce the driving question, and then you develop those need-to-knows. In the process of developing the need-to-knows, right, which is it's the first stage of inquiry right there. We know that it can turn sideways. Students like, oh, I have a question. Here's my question about this topic. Like, we're doing a unit focused on redesigning safer boxing glove for particular audiences, because Muhammad Ali is from Louisville. Did you all know that? Muhammad Ali is from Louisville, Kentucky. So we got a boxing unit focused on redesigning a safer boxing glove. 7th grade science, contact forces. And so we know in a unit with those need-to-knows, teachers facilitating that activity, and students like, oh, I want to know, I want to know where boxing came from. Like, why do we box? Which is a great question, right? Beginning PBL practitioner might be like, yeah, but we're not going to do that. That's not what this is about. It's like, no. How through the curriculum design, how do we coach teachers to become stronger facilitators? Because there's magic in that moment. There is magic in that moment for a teacher to know, to value that question, especially if it comes from a learner who's been disenfranchised. Especially if it comes from a student who does not contribute, especially if it comes from a black student who, like, we got to value that black brilliance right there. We got to understand and value that love and all of what's there. And that teacher's got to know to say, you know what, that's a fantastic question. That is something we need to know. Let's get it up there. They got to know how to center that. So we got to figure out how we help teachers run that race course to ensure that all students, that they know how to navigate this path, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think what resonates with me, Ari, what you just said, is just being seen, I think, is that aspect of being seen. I just think about, I am a product of project-based learning, and I am a person that was traditionally disengaged with school up until 10th grade. When Miss Appleton gave me a project around making a soundtrack that models a hero's journey in Beowulf. And this is like, what, 1993 for me.
So these are your early DJ days.
Early DJ days.
Word.
Yeah, and this is like, and just the fact that this was the first time that I kind of sat up in class. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, I actually don't have to necessarily just do a chapter, right? And so, like, I just remember, staying up and remember doing homework for once. Just to be able to do, like, make this soundtrack on a Maxell tape, making sure that I had the 2-minute song that fits on side A, writing liner notes and talking about how the music that I picked related to the actual hero's journey. And it's literally, like, I still carry that project to this day, because that was the first time for me as like a second generation Korean person growing up in Raleigh, North Carolina, being the only one for 1st through 8th grade. It's the first time in class that I saw scene, right? And so I think that the importance around curriculum-based curriculum and projects is that we get those projects into the hands of teachers who had learners like me. And I think it's an important thing to know, right? The fact that it is, if I didn't have that, it would be a completely different trajectory for me. And so what does that mean to be able to get teachers farther along the road to be able to then provide authentic learning experiences for students to be seen? And I think, to me, that is the crux of the work, right? That is the imperative for me of the work. So I wanted my Oprah moment, basically. So underneath your chair, there's a sticky note. You got sticky notes. There's no car, I'm sorry, it's just a sticky note, but.
If there is not a sticky note, it might be because someone was occupying your seat before we started, and I couldn't get my hand under there, because that would be weird. So there are sticky notes around, so if there's not one under your seat, there's probably one in a row near you. Yeah, front rows. There we go.
And so this is just an opportunity, because I know, like, I've seen other Den talks, and I know, like, we pass around the mic and different things, but also I recognize the fact that sometimes people don't want to be on a mic. I don't want to be on the mic personally, so I'm talking for myself. And so if you have any questions, we're going to provide some time to be able to write any questions, and then from there we will collect them and we'll kind of go through them.
Yeah. I got one that's very easy to answer. I'm going to answer that one first. So this question is about whether how our curriculum is created with whether our curriculum is created with particular regions in mind, and how it serves the local community. So so in Kentucky, we are designing our units with Kentucky teachers. There are many, many counties and many, many different kinds of local contexts. There's a lot of diversity across Kentucky contexts. So we're designing with this idea that our project should be able to live within Kentucky and honor the Kentucky context, and that a student in Louisville should learn about what's going on in Eastern Kentucky, and a student in Eastern Kentucky should know what's going on in Louisville, right? But at the same time, so a teacher can do these units right out of the box, right? And just be able to do them as is and have their students learn about a different context. At the same time, they should be able to customize, so if they don't deal with the same weather patterns in this one place that teachers in another place that the unit was designed for deal with, they can customize it for that local weather pattern. So we're trying to make it customizable in that way.
Going with customization, how do you provide space for teachers to customize while still ensuring fidelity of implementation at scale? How do you strike that balance? I mean, I think that is like a question that we are working really hard to figure out. But also, I do think that there's the space that's provided. Again, like I keep on coming back to this idea of space creators for change makers, right? What is the space that we allow teachers to be able to interrogate and get deep into the materials during a 3-day workshop, and then from there ask the question, and like really authentic questions, like what have you done before that fits in? Because we have to recognize the fact and respect teachers' practices. The fact that they have things that have worked really well in their classrooms. And we're not telling people to do something different from what has worked in their classrooms. We're asking to contextualize, to see like what are the different things that have worked and how does it work within a new frame, right? Or really thinking about like what are the resources in your area, going back to Ari's provocation around place-based work, like, what are the resources in your community that you can reach out to? Why don't we actually provide a half an hour to be able to find those resources and contact those resources, to be able to then really further contextualize to the community? And so I think that there's the space itself, I think, is going to be really important in terms of professional learning.
Can you name some concrete things that you're baking into the professional learning that a teacher could ask their principal to allow time for, or a school leader who's here could bake into the time that they have teachers working on projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think, good question. Thank you for the follow-up, because I think that's the right one.
It's
right?
Oprah. We're on Oprah.
We're on Oprah, yeah. So I think that, for me, you know, with the benefit of added curriculum in terms of the professional learning, like, we can actually look at the start and the end dates, right? Like, when are you actually going to be starting the project? When are you going to be ending the project? And also, in that case, now you have the frame to be able to find those community experts, bring in people, or find ways to be able to communicate with people in the community that will connect to the project itself. Right? In itself too, like the other things around just the simple facts around getting materials, right? Knowing the materials that are in the project. We work very closely, as I probably said before, around kind of like seeing like what the actual materials are, and then also how does the professional learning create and provide space to be able to find those materials. How do we celebrate students? Like, what are the actual specific ways that we celebrate students, and what are the opportunities within schools and within classrooms to be able to celebrate a job well done? And it's in those, I mean, like, I think that we have to realize that the students are going through rigorous, academic, hard work. And the one thing that I always say is, like, you have to celebrate the fact that they're doing these projects. Right? And just like different spaces and the things that we know are going to be super important to be able to bake into the actual time.
So one thing you're baking in, you're providing time in the professional learning for teachers to use so we're providing a template for teachers to reach out to experts. Because how often is it that in a teacher preparation program, you're taught how to reach out to a community-based organization to figure out how to have them come in and be an expert in your classroom. And then when they come in, how do you teach them how to speak to students? Because they're not teachers, right? So there's all that stuff that we need to teach teachers how to do. So he's building in time into the professional learning to have teachers send our templated emails out.
The nuts and bolts.
Nuts and bolts stuff of running a project, right? That's really important. There are a bunch of questions on fidelity of implementation. How do we ensure that we're providing, like, that we can get to teachers to fidelity of implementation? And I think removing barriers, right, to access to PBL, that's one thing that we're thinking about. And so, like, we are providing that family letter template in every unit. Hey, families, here's what we're doing for this project. Here's what kids are going to learn. Here's how you can help. We're providing emails, templated emails that the teachers can use to reach out to organizations. We're providing ideas for the kinds of experts to bring in. And we're even going one step beyond, because we know that a lot of folks might be in a rural community. They don't have a boxing gym nearby. They don't have, they don't have those experts right there. So we're going to actually build in simulated experts for them to have, just as a first level of implementation, right? So we're trying to remove those barriers, but in terms of professional learning at school spaces, what teachers need, they do need time for those nuts and bolts, right? To figure it out. I asked one of our national faculty members, Ali Wong, who was a teacher and principal, product of the high-tech high schools. I said, who actually, for all the projects you do, who actually reaches out to the community to organize all that? She's like, the teachers do. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And for a lot of teachers, that is a barrier to doing a project, just like the management of it. So we're trying to take away some of that, and Stanley's building in opportunities to do that as well. Learn how to do that in the professional learning.
I think we got a lot of questions and we got a couple minutes.
Yeah,
so
sorry
let's
about
go through it. Yeah. What differentiation and accommodation do you include for students with disabilities and second language learners? I mean, it's such an essential question. And I think there's a couple resources that I do think are really important that you can find within our website. I love our colleague Ryan Sprott did a video called the Curb Cut video. I don't know, if you haven't seen it, I would look it up for PBL Works because he really helps, at least for me, like really helps me think about like what it means to be able to differentiate and scaffold and design for the extreme user. Because I think it's an important thing that we always have to hold our extreme users, quote unquote, the ones that, you know, might be a little distracted in terms of the class, the closest. And we're planning for them. The other thing too is like Fisher Frey just came out with a really great blog around scaffolding February. The Fisher Frey, I love Fisher Frey, but also the blog around scaffolding and the ways that we front end, back end, and in process scaffold kind of just blew my mind because I'm a nerd, but I love it. It's like so good, and I highly recommend reading it. That's actually going to be in our professional learning too.
We're following the guidance of the English Language Success Forum to support multilingual learners. They have new guidance for curriculum developers. So we're using that. And then we're using principles of universal design for learning to support learners with diverse learning needs. And so those are two ways that we're, in our first versions, that we're gonna be supporting that, for those needs.
Quick one, where can we find the Bank of Projects?
So, right now they are in pilot phase. So they are going to be published nationally September 2024. So we are developing, we're field testing, we're going through all of those moves before they're published nationally. They will be free open educational resources for any teacher across the country to download and use starting in September 2024 on the PBL Works website.
Mm-hmm. And also, you can sign up to my.pblworks.org for a login. You also have a lot of resources in the project library. There's dozens and dozens of projects from all grade levels and subject areas that would be very useful if you want some ideas. So I highly recommend to do that.
Someone asked how much time is needed daily for a PBL lesson that might last 2 weeks. So our units at the middle school and high school level will be 4 to 6 weeks, assuming a 60-minute class period. We have about 12 to 13 lessons in a unit, give or take. That'll change, that'll be reduced in scope for elementary. Mm-hmm. Probably those will be 2 to 3 week units.
What drawbacks do you see to packaged projects?
Yeah, we should have another Den talk just on that one. So Stanley was talking about the need for teacher autonomy in order to design based on their students' needs. The drawback is, one drawback to having a packaged product is that they are not going to design from scratch. What we're doing is we're positioning that we have multiple pathways. One pathway into PBL is teacher as designer. That's still a really strong pathway. So often we have heard from teachers, I just need something more to start with. For those teachers, we are going to give them something more to start with. That's what this is. However, we also know the care and attention we need to pay to supporting them to be able to still think critically about what they're doing. Just because we are giving it to them doesn't mean that it is perfect. There's always a process of redesign. You get something, you redesign it. That's what teachers do all the time, on a daily basis, adapting it, right? So we want to engage them in that process, even with the curriculum materials, in a process of redesign as they're thinking about who their students are, what they know, where they need to grow, and how they want to implement.
My district has been, how much time do we have? We're like done, right? I don't know how, I got one more question. All right, let's just go with this one. My district has been doing PBL, and I love the process. How do I engage the students who don't want to participate creatively? They say, just tell me what you want me to know. That's another Den talk too, by the way. Like, let's try. I do think that there's something around the fact that in so many spaces, school has been done to people, right? That they're expecting just a really easy thing that they can regurgitate on a test. There's like a little bit of unschooling to be done in Alive Spaces, right? Like, and how to be able to actually say that. Be like, you're not going to get the easy answer at times. And just be really upfront and be very, very clear in the expectations, in the setting of norms, and just knowing that and always kind of going back to that aspect would be one thing that I would think about. Because I think we all have those students, right? Just tell me what to do.
And this
I'll
is
do
where
it.
to lean on Zaretta Hammond. Yeah. This is where to lean on all that work around cognitive learning. Students who are saying that, just give it to me, give me the answer. We need to resource them with the cognitive tools and strategies, with the practice opportunities to go down into that learning pit as Zaretta talks about, to make them aware of where they are, and then to say, hey, look at this tool, look at that tool, look at that tool. Like, this is going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to get, like, we're going to get there. Right? There's that warm demander that goes on there. I mean, that's all of that culturally responsive teaching and learning that's happening, which takes time and practice. It's also a responsibility that we're taking seriously in our curriculum is how do we help teachers learn how to do that, support students in that process. So we're trying to bake that into our units to build better practitioners to be able to do that.
I think, is that our time? I
think
lost
10:30?
track. Is it, 10?
Let's say 2 minutes.
2
All right.
minutes, oh, perfect, yeah. Sorry, I got lost track. This is fun. I'm having a really good time. All right.
This one?
Yeah, sure.
How do you design an authentic, hands-on PBL experience in the humanities? Yeah, so I mean, I will say we have a ton of projects in our project library currently on pblworks.org that have humanities-based projects, which
Yes,
are great
for sure.
examples, and they're you can easily get to those.
I wonder, like, it looks like hands-on is underlined twice, so maybe
Yes.
that's the thing? That's
Yeah.
the focus of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
With hands-on in the humanities, I think we're looking at artifact-driven work. I think we're looking at taking the writing process, especially out of the digital sphere and into a physical space, even if it's just printing stuff out, cutting it up. Like let's get kids hands-on with moving pieces of their thinking around. Some of my roots are with the Bay Area Writing Project. Any writing project folks out there? No?
Whoop, whoop.
Okay. So in the writing project, we talk about this generative, messy, iterative aspect to developing compositions, right? And so there's that piece to it as well. But I think also to remember is that you can still have a construct project where kids are constructing exhibits in the humanities, and that is an important part of what folks in professional disciplines around the humanities still do. They still present, they still make presentations, they still make artifacts. So we move that into the center of humanities projects.
What would you say to brand new teachers first doing project-based learning, and they're afraid that they won't be able to cover all content? Last question? That's our last question? Okay. Ooh. Big one, too. I mean,
I got something. You got something?
why don't you go, you do your something and I'll do my something.
Okay, here we go. PBL is an opportunity to go deep with a few things. It's a 4 to 6 week span of time for a basic project where you're going to pick 3 things to go deep with and give kids multiple opportunities to practice those 3 things from 30 different angles in 30 different ways with 30 different people. Practice, 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 right? So it's not about coverage, broad coverage. It's about depth.
It's about the deep skills within the
That's right.
actual work. And also, I think also the rubric that would be connected in the form of assessment for the summative, and also the ways to be able to track that through the formative.
Yep.
Right? Like, because we are not doing a one and done thing. We are practicing, we are iterating, we are cyclical, we are continuing to be able to build skills so that they master. And I think, I should not, that they really focus and they really comprehend the standard or the content that they really want to hit for that project. But I think before that, though, you do have to know that you are mapping the project directly to standards and really big things, right?
Thank you
Okay,
for joining
yeah.
us for this
Thank
talk.
you all. That was
We can
fun.
hang out.